This book is entitled The Making of the Dorsetshire Hill Community, and it deals specifically with virtually the end of the Carib community, and not so much the community as the end of the Carib resistance against European powers, of course mainly in the form of England. And it tells a lot of the last few days before the Carib War, the Second Carib War. That's the war where Britain actually defeated the Caribs and eventually sent them into exile. Therefore, in this book, we detail virtually the period just before that. We move backwards a little bit to the time when St. Vincent was captured by the French from the British in 1779, and the period which followed that, when St. Vincent was entirely under French rule, until 1783, after the Treaty of Versailles, when France handed St. Vincent back to the British. Now, that period was a pretty awkward period for the Caribs, because they had backed the French in the battle which France used to overthrow St. Vincent in 1779. And so they felt very secure that they were on the side of the French. But when the French surrendered St. Vincent back to the British, it meant that the Caribs were once again on the wrong side, because they were sort of holding out against the British. That all ended with the Second Carib War, when in 1796 the English overran the Caribs on Dorsetshire Hill, and in that battle, Chatouillet, the chief, died. Now, the book details a little bit of that period, which finished up with the actual battle on Dorsetshire Hill and the death of Chatouillet. I am putting forward in this book for the first time, perhaps in St. Vincent, that the possibility exists that Chatouillet was buried on Dorsetshire Hill. The question has always been asked, okay, he died on Dorsetshire Hill. That's pretty well accounted for, because he was never seen again in public. But what happened to his body? Where was he buried? There was a lot of speculation all over St. Vincent that he was buried here or there or that. But I am putting forward a new theory that he was buried on the top there. And it's fairly well substantiated why I think that he was buried there.
Why?
Now, why he was actually buried there. The circumstances surrounding that. If he died there, they had to bury him within one day, because it's not in these climates. If you die in the morning, you're buried by the afternoon. Other than that, they'll have to get rid of you somewhere. But at the end of that battle, he was not the only person who died. There were several persons who died: Frenchmen, Caribs, people who were defending the hill. A lot of them died there, so they had to bury them. And Chatouillet, I'm putting forward the idea that he was buried along with the others, and they were buried on the top of the hill right there. And we know exactly the place where the fort was, and that's where the battle took place. Therefore, we believe that he was buried with the others pretty close to where that battle actually took place. But that is only the first part of the book. The second part of the book deals with the coming to St. Vincent of persons of Irish and Scottish descent. That movement from England to the West Indies took place at a much earlier time, when Cromwell was in charge of everything there, and because of political and religious reasons, a number of persons who didn't fall in line were punished by being sent as prisoners as slaves to the West Indies, mainly to Barbados. There are other places which took some as well, but mainly to Barbados. And they worked on Barbados as slaves in the plantations like the other slaves who came from Africa. So on the plantations you had three different groups: the planters themselves, that was one lot, and the slaves, which would have been the second lot, but the slaves section was divided into two. The white slaves who had come from, their parents had come from Ireland and Scotland, and those who were of African descent. Now, after emancipation, all the slaves were set free. That meant that all of them had to go looking again for work of some sort to maintain themselves. Now, there was a little bit of a contention between the slaves of African descent and the slaves who were of Irish or Scottish descent. Under the hot, sunny climate here in the West Indies, the people of African descent seemed to have worked much better, and so they were preferred ahead of those who came from Ireland and Scotland as regards finding new employment. And so those who were of Scottish and Irish descent had to sort of eke out a living, and it was very difficult for them. And what happened, that led almost to a deterioration in the quality of their health and also standards of living, and there was a lot of inbreeding and other things which came as a result of that. And so after a few years, the government of Barbados thought it necessary to ask the colonial office to give them some kind of help to deal with these people who were there after emancipation, had no work, and were virtually deteriorating in the quality of life, especially in the area of health. And so the colonial office decided that they would try to get them to send some of those persons to the other islands which would have been willing to take them. Well, it's a pretty long story, but anyway, some of them came to St. Vincent, some came to the St. Vincent Grenadine Island of Bequia, some went on to Grenada. But we were more concerned in the book about those who came to St. Vincent. They came to St. Vincent and they virtually started